There's a nifty little set of tools in After Effects that allows you to distort the shapes of layers. Those tools are called puppet tools. I'm going to introduce you to the puppet tools in this lesson, and then we're going to dive into the details in the remaining lessons in this chapter. So to follow along, go to Working Files, go to After Effects Projects, and go on down to 1201 Puppet Intro. This comp has 5 layers, 5 different kinds of things, because I want to show you that you can use the puppet tools on all sorts of different kinds of layers, not just on like little characters that you want to move around the screen. So we're going to start off with this full screenshot of this image here, and I want to show you something else before I show you the puppet tool. The puppet tool works with a mesh, and there's an effect inside After Effects called the mesh warp. Let's look it up here, M-E-S-H, there it is, mesh warp. I'm going to apply it to this first layer here so you get a chance to see what it looks like. That is the mesh warp, and the mesh warp puts this rectangular grid on a layer. You can click on any intersection, and these little control lines come up and allow you to distort that intersection, move it around, and then twist it a little bit, things like that. And that's basically how the puppet tool works. Let me take this off to show you that one instead. The puppet tool doesn't use rectangles, it uses triangles. And you can find the puppet tools up here in the Tools panel. But like the paint tools, the puppet tool really is an effect. So you click on this, and it turns on this little collection of features. It has the mesh checked on. We're going to use that so you can see the mesh here. All I need to do is just click someplace, and it puts the mesh over this layer. And the mesh basically conforms itself to whatever shape is there. But in this case, since it's a full screen thing, it just kind of scatters itself around there. I'm going to add a couple more points, and notice that the mesh doesn't change when you add the points. It doesn't really try to put a point at an intersection, for example. It just puts the point there amongst the mesh. I've got these 5 points here. I'm going to drag just one of them and kind of watch what happens here. Watch the mesh as it distorts. And let go of the mouse, you get that shape there. Notice how things kind of were anchored here where the other points were. That's how it works. It tries to be realistic as it moves things around sort of naturally, organically. But it also tries to honor, if you want to call it that, the other points so that they remain static. There you go. So this is how this works. You make these little points, you can drag them around. And you can animate this, of course. All these guys are keyframeable. Okay, let's move on down the line here a bit to ones where it's probably a little more obvious that you would use it there. Going to go on down the notch here to the shape layer here, turn off the visibility and turn on the visibility for the shape layer. There you go. Now, some people may think that, why would you want to put a puppet tool on the shape layer? But it has all kinds of possibilities. You can twist around all kinds of different shapes. So it's kind of fun to work with. I'm just going to start clicking some points here, click some points here, and put a couple in the middle there too. There we go. Now I'm just going to drag this one around here, pull it to the right. Notice how it stretches out and how the one to the left tries to kind of keep this in place, but at some point it kind of, has to let go a little bit, right? But it will twist it and it will put a little point there as the farther I pull this thing out. It does try to sort of give you a sort of natural feel. Notice how things don't move much up here though, because these two guys are sort of anchoring things. We'll try this one as well. I'll twist it over to the right like that. There you go. And these guys again act as kind of an anchor. If I click on one of them and delete it, notice how it does kind of release things. Click on this one, delete it. There you go. And that's what will happen if you start adding points and taking points away. You can control it that way. Notice also that it can twist back on itself. Kind of twist it around, contort it like that. You can make these things go in front of or behind objects like that, depending on where you put these pins in what's called the Z space. All right, let's move on down a little bit farther. Take a look at this text, which is really cool because the text works on a per character basis, even in a string of text like this. If I click on the letter A, for example, it takes care of the whole A plus that hole there. If it's a closed space like that, it fills it in with the mesh. Click down at the bottom. And just think of the possibilities here. I'm going to put one on top here. And you can do something like this. You can cause the A to bounce around like a happy A or something like that, right? If I click on the B, you get that same thing where it fills in the holes like that. But the C, it won't because that's not closed. Okay, let's move on down to this little boy here. And this is probably the more likely candidate for the puppet tool. But the thing is, his feet or his legs are crossed there. So you really can't make him walk because they're stuck together. That's one of the downsides to working with something like this where it's all connected like that. If you can go back to Photoshop to unconnect them and then fill in the blanks, more power to you. But as it is here, it won't work very well. If I click on his foot there, I click on his other foot, I want to move this first foot independently of the second one. It won't happen. They work very much together like that. But you can move other parts. So I'll click on his chest here and his shoulder and his wrist, maybe his head here to kind of keep it steady. Now I can move his hand around a little bit like this. Hello, kind of a thing. His face moves a little bit. I can click there to keep that from happening. Hello again. There we go. So you can kind of stretch them out. Whoa. All right. Let's move it down one more notch here to something that looks like a puppet. Now this one will work a lot better because his legs and arms are separated. They're not connected together. There's a space between them. Not much of a space, but enough of a space that lets us move these things independently. Let me show you how that works. I'll click here, here, and let's say up at his knee. And his torso will also connect this other leg down here so they don't work in concert. If I want to move this leg independently of the other ones, I'll click on these two by going click and then shift click on the other little dot there on his foot. I'll pull these guys off to one side. There you go. They work independently. We can move his knee as well. Hello. We want to move all three. We can. We can connect all three of them. So I think you get a sense of all the Puppet Tools possibilities. We'll look at them in more detail in the upcoming lessons.